Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, dan salam kebajikan. First of all, on behalf of Human Resource and Development, we would like to say thank you for Kak Batara Mulya for your willingness to participating in our training of trainers. This program aims to prepare and also introduce to our existing member, batch 2021 of Hasanuddin English Speaking Society, to prepare their self to be the next coach of Hasanuddin English Speaking Society, or at very least to lead their self in debating. Without any further ado, I call Kak Fitra as President of Hasanuddin English Speaking Society to open this program.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So firstly, I would like to say thank you so much for Kak Batara and everyone in HRD for holding this ToT. I really hoping that this Zoom and this time we can like try to dig deeper on debate and just like have fun, do what you love with the people that you love right now, and just like learn more so you guys can like join more competitions and become the coach for the next generation, specifically the 2020 HEDS members. From here, I think that for closing the times, I would like to open the ToT and let Kak Batara held it from here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kak Fitra, for your opening remarks. Now I call the moderator for first sessions in training of trainer, Shahra Nur Azizah. Time and floor is yours.
Thank you, Nasal. Hello, I'm Shahra from Ministry of HRD 2022. It's an honor for me to be moderator for this first session in training of trainers HEDS 2022. Into this first section, we'll be having Kak Batara as the coach for the brief introduction about Kak Batara. Kak Batara is from BINUS University. He is best speaker IFA 2022. He is active coach in multiple universities and high school, and also a core in a lot of debate tournament, both in national and international level. But before that, we want to encourage you guys to turn on your camera during the session. In this session, Kak Batara will talk to us about how to arrange practice strategies, especially how to finding motion and curriculum. After that, we'll be having Q&A session for 10 until 15 minutes. This is definitely very interesting topic, and I'm sure everyone here is just excited as I am. And also Kak Batara, Kak Batara already in here. Without further ado, the place is yours, Kak.
Okay, thank you. For Nazal, can you please give me a co-host so I can share my screen?
Okay,
okay, thank you. Hold on, let me just get to the tab. Okay. Thank you everyone, and welcome to the first HEDS training of trainers for today. For the topic I'm going to be talking about today, I'm going to be bringing the topic of how to arrange practice strategies, finding motion, and building curriculum. So the main thing about my current topic or material today is I'm going to be explaining how to set your training system to be successful. This isn't going to fully analyze how to do it or execute on it. It will be more down to the coaches. So this is not just going to be used by people who are training, but even if you're just arranging the training, if you're going to be discussing with the coaches, you're not going to be leading the coaching at all. You're not the one actually making the motions. This is still going to be useful. So you can discuss with the coaches on how to set up your actual curriculum and how to make sure that the motions they use are correct. So when the coaches will ask, what's your motion request? Is there any specific way you want to be coached? This is a way you can request to the coaches to make sure that whatever your training method you end up using is going to be one that's effective. So, what are the main steps in building a curriculum? This is what I do personally. One is the goals. Uh, you have to make sure that your goals are clear. I'm going to get into it later. Second is you have to trust the process. You don't want to just quick results. The process is actually really, really important. Thirdly is specifically where to find the motions and the materials you want to use. What's the matter? Lastly is knowing your audience. I'm going to go a lot deeper here on knowing your audience because in my personal experience with the coaches I've heard about and the coaches I've had, the problem is they don't know their audience. They just want to coach however they want to coach, and it's up to the debaters to understand or not. So it's up to you to be able to find the coach that knows their specific audience that you're looking for or that you have as your trainees. So let's start with goals first. When it comes to goals, what you have to find out is what are your goals within and after the training period. So your goal shouldn't just be okay, automatically if you want to prep for NUDC, IFET, or anything like that, it's automatically just okay, we want an open break, we want a novice break, we want a novice champ, we want speaker awards. It can't be that simple because if that's the case, you're not going to be able to make sure that your coach knows what to improve on, and you're not going to be able to understand or appreciate if there are goals along the way. Who do you discuss the goals with? One, the main thing are the participants, because, or basically your trainees or the people who are going to be going through the process. Because if they have goals that don't align with you, that's going to be bad. If you have a team that wants to be a novice breaking team, but you're pushing them to be open break, there's a disconnect there. They might feel like they are being too much pressure. They're given too much pressure. If you have a team that's very strong, but they're only wanting a novice break, understandable, but make sure to discuss with them that open break is possible, but novice break is acceptable. That's just an example. But what are the other goals that you can have? And this is something that you can be bold and trying to discuss about.
Excuse me, Kaya.
Yeah.
I think there are like a shadow in your screen. I assume it's came from the Zoom picture from the participant in right side.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me just
Okay,
put this away. Is it still there?
yeah.
Hold on. Let me actually just turn off. How do I put away this? Oh, there we go. Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. Also, I want to be able to see it. Okay. When it comes to the goals, there are at least four ways you can break it down other than just results. One is the team-based goals. What I mean by this is the improvements you can make on a team level. The simplest one is, yeah, you can get results, you can get progress. But even things like, can you improve the team dynamics? Because sometimes you have a team that already has decent speakers, pretty good speakers, or speakers that have similar experience level. But maybe you want to improve their dynamic. Maybe what you want to improve on is like their chemistry, how they can case build together, etc. If you have those types of teams or team compositions, it's totally fine to have a team-based goal of like, okay, by the end of the 2 weeks of training, we're not really expecting the speakers to improve a lot because individually they're already great speakers. What you want is their chemistry to be better. What you want is for them to be able to case build a lot more efficiently or be able to strategize better. So I think that's something that you can have as a team-based goal other than just results and progress. But individual goals, there's a lot of this that you can have. Like for example, one, you can have improvement in structure. You can have it so there is a speaker that's what that from a raw like intelligence level, general knowledge, or their English is already good. What you want them to improve on is their structure. Maybe they can speak well normally, or they can discuss well in like a brainstorm or matter loading style, but they don't have the structure yet. So that could be the improvement you're looking for. They can improve in style if they already are smart, but they have really, really bad wording. They're really, really inefficient. they're really, really whatever their problem is. They could also be very, very smart only in specific motions. And what you want them to do to have is consistency. So the goal isn't for them to be better, but just to be consistent. Improve in matter. If there's someone who has good debating logic, but they don't know anything about IR, economy, or etc. Or there's an interesting one as well, especially going to be relevant in BP, is strategy. Because sometimes you have teams that are already good in many respects, but they are repetitive when they're doing closing. They don't know how to strategize to kick out the closing team. They don't know how to make sure they're top two in a tight BP room. So strategy matters. It's adaptability, etc. So these are different goals you can have. It's not just general improvement. You can say you can try to analyze your trainees and like see, oh, they're actually already good at doing their own speeches. They're good at delivering for speaker speeches, but they're not good at explaining or strategizing and changing their case if their opening already takes their arguments. This is something that you can specifically have as a goal. And there's two time periods within the training period, which is like, okay, maybe you have your training period be a month, but you want to have specific improvements after only 2 weeks, after 3 weeks, etc. And after the training period, which is the outcome of the major competition, that's the more basic one. But the team-based and individual goals is, I think, what you have to be able to recognize as something that is relatively different than the typical way you want to set up your goals. Next is trusting the process. So you have to choose the training methods that are appropriate. First, and personally for me, is the one that I do the most often, which is efficient sparring, not full sparring. Efficient sparring is like opening debate, just the delegates versus another set of delegates, or the delegates versus two sparring partners. You don't want to have a full bench spar if it's just gonna one take an extra 30 minutes in the training because it's 7 minute speeches times four, and you have to also give feedback to speakers that don't really are either A, not that committed anyway, or B, not really going to contribute yet. This is not me saying, oh, it's a bad thing if the non-delegates train. That's not what I'm saying. But if the non-delegates are not as committed and they just ignore the feedback, I'd rather just be having opening debate. 3 and 3, no reply, without a reply speaker, I mean, on AP or Australs, and or individual speeches. Anyway, either way, having efficient sparring is very possible. If you have a coach, you sure you want to get the most out of them, but at the same time, it's fine to only have opening and have the other people listen to the feedback. If they're not in the mood for training, you don't need to force them. As long as there's a speech that they can respond to, that's fine. Even an OG versus one speaker is totally fine. I use this process to teach both the uh Telcom and UDC teams for 2022 and KDME Unpad 2022, and it's totally fine. It's about improving the main targets. You can improve everyone else along the way, but understand that if they don't want to be the main focus, don't give pressure on them either. The second option is clearly full bench sparring, like full four teams in BP. But um, when you're doing this, make sure that your uh, delegates know specifically it's not about just individual training. It's not just about improving their own speeches, but at this point, they have to try real life or real situation strategies. They have to do much more POI. They need to be able to specifically beat their opening. You don't want them just to have a good speech, beat their opposition, and then get second place. You want them to specifically be able to beat their opening, for example, and you put a pretty good team in their opening. The whole goal of full bench spar is to give them these situations you cannot access with an efficient spar. Because if they're in a random situation anyway, might as well just do the efficient spar because that's much faster and you get the same results. When you're doing discussion or brainstorming, you don't want them just to be feeding the information. You don't want just like whoever is doing the brainstorming or leading the meta loading just to talk for like 4 hours nonstop. You want to have it be a back and forth. Why? because you want to make sure that the people who are training actually understand what is happening and actually understand the discussion. You don't want them to just be like, okay, I'm listening, and then when it comes time to debate, they don't know how to explain it. It has to be a back and forth. Make sure that the coach asks, oh, do they understand? Does this make sense? Etc. Next is when it comes to before you do your next training, make sure methods, for example, a re-speech is done and reviewed. I think other coaches might say like they have to write a paper. I don't like doing that because you don't win by writing a paper. You can write the paper, you can show, you can have 4 pages of like, okay, this is what an interesting speech looks like. But if you deliver it unclearly, if you don't know how to speak it, if you don't give the framing, if you don't deliver it efficiently, then that paper can go in the trash because you're never going to win a debate competition using the paper. You're only going to win this a debate competition using the speech. So that's why I'm against using papers personally. But if that's what you want, go ahead. I just recommend before your next training, make sure there is a re-speech, or at least, yeah, make sure there's a re-speech of the motion that you just trained or the topic you just trained on. And make sure it's also reviewed, because if they just do a re-speech and it's dog shit, that's bad. You want to make sure that the re-speech is actually being done correctly and being reviewed correctly so they know they're doing the right thing. And lastly, when it comes to the process, is even if there's repetition in re-speeches, they might do the re-speech, the same motion re-speech 3 or 4 times, or similar motion several times. It's fine, because for me at least, the goal of coaching is to build muscle memory, habits, and standard behavior. That means that you want to make sure when time comes to do a competition, the debaters are not thinking from zero. They're actually prepared, and they actually already know how to deliver the arguments. It's just a matter of using different matter and reusing the same argument styles, argument systems. Now that's why you just have to trust the process. Next is what's the matter. So I think the biggest thing is where do you find the motions and what's the relevant stuff. First is the resource. Where do you find the motions? The first way to use it is you can use motions from the past few years or recent competitions. I'm gonna share this Canva later, but I'm just gonna give you guys this link for this Google Doc. Here's what you will get. Uh, can you guys still see me? See the window, I mean.
Iya, iya Kak. Bisa.
Okay, so here's the global debating spreadsheet. I think if I share it, you go here. This is just schedules for competitions. HBP kemarin ada di sini kan. So you guys know lah. But go to the tabs section in the bottom, and you can see there's going to be an endless amount of competitions. On the left, it's all of the major competitions. So it's like World Schools, UADC, EUDC Worlds, and UDC Australs, whatever, all of that. In the middle, there's large tournaments, 20 rooms and above. You can see the tournament name and a tab link. And then you have BP tournaments, you have AP tournaments, and then you have school tournaments, Australs, and other stuff that doesn't matter on the right. So when it comes to this, the way you want to use it is pretty simple. See, HBP is right here. So you can go, for example, like, okay, let's go. If there's a competition that you think is somewhat interesting, like okay, let's try this one, Hard House IV. A recent big competition. Just by clicking this one, tab link, you should be able to show up on the tab, and then from here, just click the motion tab. I usually like to see its motions. You can look at the balance to see what motions could be like usable. With this, it's kind of like heavy for opposition and weak for government, and it's also heavy for opening. OO wins most debates here. But anyway, this is how you can find the motions. So as far as resource, this is what you have. You can have the hard house motions, for example. There's already 5 rounds in prelims and about 5 elims as well. So this is where you can find motions for several competitions. Other than this, you can have, for example, um, yeah, so many other ones. You have also TaTo, Manila Varsity, and this is not just a few competitions. It is a lot of competitions. These are all just the major ones, all the way up until the early 2020s. And when it comes to BP, there is a lot of competitions here. I suggest when you open the competition, let's go for a random one. Let's say like here on Brack genders. Or if that's taking a while to load, let me try and open. Oh, it's open. Okay. So go to the original tab and let's look at the adjudication. Here you can see that the A core is actually pretty good. You have Claudia, Nayara, Jess Musulin, XK, Akash, and Shudipto. So okay, so you know these are good A cores. Then you can just check the motions, and then okay, you can at least be sure that all of these motions, or at least most of these motions, are good motions. Not necessarily that they're likely, but it is motions that are actually already stress tested as a good competition motion. It's already a motion that's guaranteed to have been filtered through an A core that is actually good. Because if you just look on Hello Motions, sometimes you find it, but sometimes it's from competitions that don't have good A cores. So when you're doing it, that's how you can find the good motions. Other than this, I think the other simple ones, maybe they don't show up in the global tab, is like tabs from NUDC, past NUDC, IFED, JOFED, etc. So that's how you can find the resource to do it. I'm going to continue on there. But how do you actually choose the motions? One, you got to choose motions that are not outdated or too specific. If it's a motion talking about NFT, that is outdated because NFT is dying. If there's a motion talking about the pandemic, that is becoming relevant. People don't care as much anymore. If there is a motion talking about that um, US politics, you can avoid that most likely unless it's like general election stuff. Second, what you do with the motion, if you're the coach, is that you write down at least two fully thought out arguments for each side. If you're not the coach, then you don't have to worry about this one. Next is you can pay attention to the logic of the arguments more than the specifics of the motion. Make sure that you can actually like explain two solid arguments on both sides. Lastly, other than the actual motions themselves, where else you can find matter and explanations is you can just search on YouTube Worlds Debating Seminar, UDC Debating Seminar, UADC Debating Seminar, and that's where you can find a lot of material. You can find a lot of examples of people delivering good material if you want either A, to explain it yourself, or B, have other people watch it. So yeah, that's where you can find the information. If you want more questions on this, if you have any question on how to like break this down more, feel free to do so in the Q&A later. Last part, but I'm going to be breaking this down so we have a few slides to get through. Last part is knowing your audience. The key thing here is adapt your curriculum to the target, time, and experience level of your trainees. Because one, as I mentioned before, the target isn't just the result you're looking for, but what's the specific thing they need? They might be a good team already, a team that can deliver arguments, a team that can make sure that their speeches reach 76, 77 consistently. They know the basic arguments, but what they need improvement on is like the depth, the structure, the style, the framing, the conclusion, etc. I'm going to break this down later on specifically that. Second, time is also important because you have to recognize how much time you have, how many sessions you have to measure the amount of potential progress that your team potentially has is able to do. And thirdly, the experience level should also determine the motion type, the level of feedback they give or are given from their coaches, and the amount of progress per session that's to be involved. So what can you expect from them really? and basically any other adjustments that are necessary according to the trainees that you have. So let's go. Let's try. I'm gonna try and breaking this down so you know what to look for. First, let's talk about if your audience is a newbies or like basically people who are relatively or yeah, or maybe you can call them novice speakers as well. First is use motions that are much more simple or common. Avoid matter-based motions or IR motions. This is most likely things like basic proposal motions like banning a certain bad action, this house prefers motion, this house believes motion, that is like just a simple principle, helping like minority groups, helping the feminist groups, those sorts of things. Those are the motions you want to have because those are the ones that you can have a lot of like personal experiences or general knowledge that is accessible as their main arguments. Second is you have to be reasonable. With a newbie team, even if they're talented, even if they're smart, what you want them to have is consistency. You want them to be able to consistently reach 75 or 76 when they are being coached. You can either ask the coach to score them every single training to make sure you can track their progress, but in any case, you want to make sure that you're being reasonable with your team here. Make sure they can try and reach at least 75, 76 only and not push them to be like much higher than that in their early stages. Second of all, you want them to focus on their ability to at least deliver 2 or 3 layers of analysis per argument. You're not expecting too much out of them. Whatever basic idea they have, make sure they can at least break it down and elaborate it because that's often the biggest problem with newbie teams is that they want to bring so many arguments, but none of them are good enough or complete enough to be counted by the judge. So they're going to get the feedback under elaborated, um, it was not enough, or it was just an assertion, etc. So you want them to habituate giving good illustration and elaboration, being complete in their arguments, so it's not just left as an assertion. And so here's the last tip on newbie teams is do not be afraid to use similar motions multiple times. You want them to be familiar in just at least a few headings rather than barely know about several headings. So if you want to make them like debate a movement motion like 4 or 5 times in a row, that's fine. You want them to debate a glorification or like a norm or stigma type of motion 3 or 4 times in a row, that's fine. You want them to make sure them to have experience in at least one heading or a few headings, so when you encounter that heading, they already know how to understand. They already understand how to debate that motion consistently and how to make sure that that motion is never going to make them uh, fail, or they're going to at least be able to get a acceptable score in those motions. So when it comes to newbie teams, you want to take it slow with them and make sure they can actually get across the finish line and get those average scores on a few headings rather than try and get them ready for everything yet. Because if they're not ready in a few headings, they're never going to be ready for the others. Let's look at for the next group, which I would say is the average speakers. Speakers who can consistently get 75, 76. Speakers who don't really mess up, but they can't quite like get high scores yet. Or they cannot quite beat like the open breaking teams. How do you train them? So first is you can add more variety in your motions here. You can use more IR, philosophy motions, like specific economic motions or art motions, whatever motions that are like slightly more difficult, it is okay to use here. Here, you can expect more out of them. If you see that they're able to consistently get 75s, you can start testing them. Aim to have a consistency in reaching 77 to 79, a range of score where if you're pretty good, you should be able to get this. This is something that you can get that can make sure you win in a bottom to middle room and make sure you at least survive in a top room. So aim them to have at least a 77 or 79 consistently. That's what you want them to have. What do you do to make them reach this? first is focus. You can start focusing on advanced style. By advanced style, that doesn't mean like, oh, their English has to be better. Well, I'm talking about like they're gonna have to use structures that are not just assertion, reasoning, elaboration, link back, just um argument layer, 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 argument layer, layer, layer. You want them to have more advanced style. For example, you want them to be able to have clear, strong framing, giving burdens to their opponents, making sure they can actually uh understand where the debate is going, what the motion involves, etc. Making sure when they're making comparisons, they're making logical comparisons, not just saying on their side, best case Guinea, on our side, best case Guinea. That's basic level. If you want it to be better, on government side, they want to reach this goal. This goal is not good because blah blah blah. On our side, we want to reach this goal. This goal is better because blah blah blah. So you want them to have more focus in a higher level of structure and more like strategies that are previously not discussed. So with the previous team, with the newbie team, the goal was simply to have a speech that is acceptable by the judge and make sure you can get 75, 76. With average teams, what you want them to do is specifically train to be able to beat teams. This is where you want them to be more to now be more adaptive to other teams, so they can understand. Okay, this team is already doing well, like their opponent is doing a correct argument. This goal of the speech is no longer I just want to do my own speech that is also good. No, you want them to specifically create speeches that beat your opposing team. For example, their framing has to then directly clash with their opponent. Their comparison has to be very direct with the best case of their opponent. Those sorts of things. So with average speakers, what you then want to do is you don't want to spend too many sessions in similar motions. You want to aim to have no gaps in their headings and be solid in most rounds in an entire tournament. So with a newbie team, it's fine to just have like expect them to, out of 4 preliminary rounds, for example, have 2 rounds where they can get average to above average score, and have 1 round where they're below average, and have 1 round where they maybe completely flop. That's totally fine. A newbie team has to go through that. Every team has to go through that. But with an average team, that a team that can already consistently get 75, 76 in several different competitions in all of their prelims, the goal is no longer to have just not fail, because at that point they're already good. They're most likely won't fail unless like an externality happen or type of motion they are not prepared for happens. So that's why you have to make sure that they have no gaps in their headings. If they are previously weak in IR, teach them IR. If they were previously weak in religion, teach them religion, those sorts of things. Lastly, this is where most likely you're going to have to discuss with your coach, with the coach that you call in, what you want out of the coaches. First, and this is for experienced debaters, these are probably your main delegates if they want to break open, if they want to go far in the LMs, etc. First is use motions very recently used in tournaments, especially grand finals, semifinals rounds, etc. So this is where you use like NUDC finals motion, KDMI finals motions, semifinals, quarterfinals, NSDC, LDBE, quarterfinals and semifinals, grand finals motion, worlds semifinals, quarterfinals motions, etc. You want to use motions that are very recent because most likely either A, your opponents have also used the motions for training, or B, these motions are the archetype. They are the like stereotypical finals motion, a super whatever philosophical motion about whatever. That's the trend with the status quo, and that's what you can most likely use as their training. With experienced teams, sure, it's going to give them more pressure, but if they're good, you want to make sure that the coach does not settle for anything less than a 79 speech at all sessions. If they ever go below a 79, maybe below a 77, at that point, that is a complete flop. They have to do several re-speeches on that motion to reach 79 again in the re-speech. Otherwise, don't move on. Because if they can still fuck up that badly, that means they still need a lot of training on that type of motion to make sure that it is consistent throughout all headings. At this point, when with experienced debaters, you want them to be able to focus on depth, efficiency in time, and use things like weighing. When it comes to depth, what I mean is that they can't just have 2 or 3 layers in an argument. They have to make sure that the argument there's an argument, there's several conclusions that you can get from that. The illustration is 3 or 4 illustrations deep, but at the same time, you want to be efficient in their time. You want them to just talk for like 7 minutes, but 4 minutes of it was just technical stuff that nobody cares about. That's not going to give you the round winning. And lastly, use things like weighing. This is not a seminar on weighing, so yeah, just ask your coach if they understand the concept of weighing, why an argument is important, etc. That's what's going to have to be used in their speeches. Look for NSTC, um, the NSTC finals debate. The I think Deputy Prime Minister, yeah, Kalista, the best speaker from Jakarta, she uses clear weighing at the end of her arguments. That's an example of how you can use it. Next is the goal is no longer just to win rounds. The goal is to always have the best possible speech in any round, in all rounds possible. So you're not just trying to, okay, your opponent is kind of weak, you want to beat them. No, 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 no. You have to assume that your opponent is going to be incredible, so you're going to put on the best potential speech ever. That has to be the mindset of the experienced teams going into a competition. And lastly, this is going to be weird, but you can revisit several headings a few times to make sure they are completely covered and teams are able to fully strategize in those headings. So with the newbie, you want them to focus on a few headings and ignore the others. With average debaters, you want them to focus on several headings. With experienced teams, you want them to focus on back to only a few headings because you want them to master one by one the headings. You want them to master an economy motion, master a philosophy motion, master a movement motion. Because with experienced teams, their goal is no longer just to win rounds and get some VP. You want them to be able to get 3 VP and really high team scores in every single round possible. And the way you do that is focusing one by one. So that's how you can understand and know your audience. What are the things to avoid? This is the last thing I want to talk about. One, avoid using motions that you want and instead motions that your team needs. Don't ever just think, oh, okay, this is a really trendy one. I just saw this in a grand finals and this was really fun. I want to debate this. Who gives a shit? You're not the one that's going to be doing a competition. It's the delegates that's doing the competition. Just because the semifinals motion of a competition was interesting, your newbie team doesn't give a shit about that. You have to find motions that they need to train them instead of motions you want just because you want to blah 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 about a debate you just watched. Don't do that. That's horrible. Second, is you don't want to give feedback that is not applicable or usable within a short time. You don't want to give a newbie team, this is how you do framing. They don't understand what framing means. You just may want them to be able to understand how to deliver their arguments consistently strong. That's the main thing. Next is you never want to assume that when you give feedback, it is automatically understood and usable. It'll take time and effort. That's why re-speeches are important. Fourthly, you don't want to have any disconnect in goals or expectations. That's going to make A, the coach frustrated, and B, the debater feel pressured. Fifthly, you don't want to employ or find a coach you want that isn't appropriate for the target. So with a newbie coach, you want to make sure that the coach wants to actually build newbie teams. Because I'm sorry, a lot of times several coaches use motions that they just want or motions they assume, yes, semua orang bisa gini. Padahal the newbie team doesn't really know those sorts of things. So you want to make sure the coach is appropriate for the target. A lot of coaches, and a little bit of hint, a lot of coaches are pretty good at turning average teams to great teams or great teams to even better teams. But not a lot of coaches have the patience or the experience to coach from absolute zero to average, then average to get higher. So make sure the coach you get is not just one that wants to chat about already good teams, but starting from zero. And the last part is a harsh truth. Whatever method you have, all of that goes out the window if you don't have trainees or people who you're going to be coaching that doesn't want to learn. So you want to make sure that from the people being coached that they actually want to learn as well. I don't have to mention names, but I'm sure in all of our experiences, there are people who don't want to learn. They don't want to re-speech, ada mulu alasannya nggak latihan, those sorts of things. If they have that, don't blame the coach if they can't improve. Directly talk to the people who don't have the time. If they start making excuses, then well, I'm sorry. Then that just means the delegates chosen are just bad delegates. So it's sometimes that way. You can't always just blame the coach. So yeah, those are the things to avoid. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you for coming today, and we're gonna open the Q&A session while I also start sharing the link for the Canva if you want to start reading it.
If you guys have a question regarding the material from Kak Batara, please turn on your microphone or just raise your hand.
Link is there, and just in case you also want to, hold on, want to open the global limiting spreadsheet so you can start checking out other motions from the competitions. There we go. Those are the links. You can save those. Okay, ada dari Naza?
Nasal, this
Okay, thank you, Shahra. Thank you, Shahra. Thank you, Kaya. So my questions regarding the materials broke by Kaya is that if we try to understand our audience, especially for the trainees, but the most of the keys and heads especially, we are not having the delegates with the same level. For example, we have two teams of delegates, which one team is our main team, and the another team came from the newbies or novice team. Then the question is that which strategies that you are see that more proper for the conditions of delegates who didn't have same level, for example, because based on your presentations, it's have different cases between coaching the delegates that have average level and also newbies level.
Okay, okay. Okay, I got the question. So yeah, different levels. One, the simplest one is basically have when it comes to the motion selection, it's just you can switch it out every single session. Like in one session, it'll be the easy motion. In the next session, it'll be maybe a slightly harder motion, and then back to an easier motion and back to a harder one. So it's a first thing you can do is just keep switching. Second of all, is that even if they train together, make sure that the feedback given is different. That's what I do when I'm coaching teams of different scales or different skill level. Um, if I know I'm coaching a team that is already good, then when I give them the feedback, I will give them different wording, different feedback, and like different things to improve on. If I'm coaching someone, but if in that same session I'm coaching a newer team, then I'm going to be giving them different feedback. I won't tell them the full framing. I won't tell them the full comparison. I'm just going to say, okay, you already brought this argument. Here's 3 ways you can improve that argument. Deliver this, deliver this, deliver this. That's it. I'm not going to give them the framing. I'm not going to give them like that much more, that like much more. So even if they're together, the first thing is when it comes to the motion, um, I think it's honestly fine to compromise on the quality or the depth of the motion because the strong, quote unquote, strong team will still have to face the easy motion in the preliminary rounds. So like it's okay to give them like a softball type of very simple motion, like in NSDC they have a motion that was like in the prelim that was like this house would heavily tax sugar. Sure, very newbie type of motion, but if the strong team suddenly flop, suddenly don't know how to debate a simple motion, okay, you can see that's still good training for them. Or even if they're amazing at it, good. That means that is good example for the newbie team. So I would say honestly, if you have a mixed team, I would lean closer to having the easier motion because that's definitely perfect for the newbie team. But even for the great team, that's still good practice for them. Make sure they can break it down. But the key thing is not just about the motion, it's about the feedback from the coaches. Make sure that the coach tell the coach directly that, oh, for this main team, give them the feedback that is maybe more harsh, maybe expecting more, framing that's a little bit harder, maybe like give them harder strategies to implement, stuff like that. But when it comes to the newbie team, um, don't give them too much feedback. Give them the feedback that is like understandable. Just make sure they can like give like two or three more elaboration. Make sure they know how to give conclusion, and make sure they can give like the basic rebuttals. You don't have to like completely flip their arguments or whatever. Just like, okay, this is how you can give the argument. So when it comes to motion, I prefer to lean closer to make to compromising the quality to making it easier for newbie teams. But when it comes to the feedback, yeah, it's still totally fine. You can make sure that just make sure that the feedback is directed at um directed at the teams correctly. You know.
Okay, thank you, Kaya. I'm get it.
Okay, welcome. There's other questions. You can write in chat, raise hand, or whatever.
Hello guys, if you have any questions regarding the material brought by Kaya, feel free to raise hand or you can type it through chat box.
Albert, you can ask
Uh,
your
yeah,
question.
yeah, I'm assuming I'm audible, but what I want to ask is like, assuming that we are not someone that is that good in debating or judging, like, yeah, I don't know if it is relevant to the material, but how do we improve as a coach? Like, yeah, basically improving as a coach, assuming that we are not that much of a good debater, of a good judge, like, yeah, we don't necessarily get consistent 78 plus or something like that. Yeah, how do we improve as a coach to help other teams, considering the fact that we might not be able to create a really compelling arguments, or like is is being good at those two things is a prerequisite to being a good coach? Thank you.
Okay, very interesting question. So honestly, I have to be honest. You don't have to be the best debater itself, or it's very possible for you, for the debaters to be better than you, but you still coach them. Um, the way to do it is one, because the way to do it is one, when you're giving feedback. Well, the first step is when you're gonna be if you're in that situation. That's why, one, you have to, when you find a motion that you want to use, don't just give the motion and then think of the arguments later. Even me, when I'm preparing to coach anyone, before I give them the motion, I try to make the arguments first. It could take me, hamin satu mungkin. It could take me 30 minutes. It could take me an hour just to think of these arguments, write them down, whatever. So I'm prepared. So I could have literally more preparation time than the debaters. So I might not be better than them in a competition, but because I prep for an hour while they prep for 15 minutes, my arguments are going to be deeper. I can Google as well. So that's one. If your preparation is better, you can technically be a good enough coach, even if as an individual debater you're not better. Second, the other thing you can do, and this is what I really like to do sometimes, is look for debate videos on YouTube, like maybe any round from NUDC where you know like a good speeches happen, any round from UADC where you know like it's good arguments being delivered. Any motions from NSDC or LDBE where okay, this team wins, and so just not transcript their argument, but listen to the speech, try to understand the argument, and that's what you're going to be giving as feedback to your trainees. Even if you're not a good judge, even but you have experience as a judge, if you have ever judged a good team, recycle those arguments as your training material. I personally have recycled because I've judged teams like UI or UGM several times at this point. Oftentimes, I just take those motions from those competitions and then I re-explain UGM's arguments to the people I'm coaching, leading to the people I'm coaching being as good as the UGM kids. Or like not even the kids, because like I'm taking arguments from Rakyan, from Zudi, and passing them down to whoever I coach. So that's the strategy. You yourself don't have to be like the best debater yet or the best judge yet. But if you have notes from arguments of like, oh, I've already heard uh, great debaters like Kezia and Elgan already deliver this argument in an NUDC or a NOFAT or an IFAT. Well, like when they won IFAT, yeah, you can just look for any debate videos from that time, write down their arguments. This is their title. This is the first layer, second layer, third illustration, fourth illustration. So you have the notes, and that's going to be your feedback. So you're not better than your debater, but whoever you're referencing or copying from, they're better than the debaters you're coaching. That's still good enough because at that point you're giving them a way to break down the arguments that are better. This is super, super important as well and really, really cool to use if you're, for example, judging a pretty good team in a round that isn't online, because that way you can give them basically exclusive information. Because if it's not online, other people can't copy the arguments, but you can copy the arguments because you were a judge there. That's what I do a lot of times. Like, like the way I've taught the teams that I coach, especially in the past year, is that I just copy a lot of arguments from international teams and see, oh, okay, if you want to break down the idea of being a vulnerable actor in a Ateneo way or an LSE or an Oxford way, oh, this is how you do it. Okay, I'm gonna write this down. I'm gonna learn the debate, like the debate itself. I'll watch the video several times. I'll note it down. I'm like, okay, I have the basic structure of what they're trying to say. I'm gonna try explaining it. Okay, that sounds well. Okay, this is what I'm gonna be delivering to my to the trainees as well. So the key thing here is that even if you're the coach, that doesn't mean you're automatically better. That doesn't mean you're automatically good. You still prepare. For me personally, coaching isn't just okay, here's the motion, boom, done. No, it's like Hamin Satu or like Hamin Satu Minggu. I'll look at okay, we have 4 training sessions upcoming. Let me find a motion. Okay, I know this motion. I know the 2 arguments on government that Team Itebe brought, like Hans already brought. Okay, let me check my notes. Okay, Hans explained it in this, this, and this, this, and this, and this. Okay, for government feedback, I already have feedback. For opposition, there wasn't really good opposition teams in this round that I judge in this motion. I'm gonna spend like 20 minutes just trying to write down arguments here. Okay, government logic is this. What is the flip? What is the exact opposite? Okay, I'm gonna try and write that down. So I'm gonna take time to actually prepare. So even if you're not necessarily better, you can prepare yourself to inform in a good way and teach in a good way. And the key thing is, yeah, copying, stealing, watching other better debaters and delivering better arguments, and just not giving a full transcript, but writing down the assertion, the main logic, the main point of the layers, so you can explain them in your own way or explain them in a simpler way, because sometimes that's also a thing where newbie debaters see, oh, that's a great speech, don't know what he said. Kan? What you can do is, yeah, break that down. Oh, Boseo did this. The first layer talks about this. This proves this. The second layer talks about this. This proves this. Gitu. If you can't fully break it down, then just find easier motions that you can break down. So yeah, that's for me. I don't think you necessarily have to be the best debater around. But if you are putting an effort to find other information, copy from other debaters, that's still going to be efficient. They're still going to be effective in um, like redistributing that information to the people you coach.
Unfortunately, due to the limited time, I guess we can open for one more question. Is there any question for you guys? If it's still there is some of you guys want to ask a question, just raise your hand or unmute your microphone. I guess there is no more question. And we have to end this session. Thank you, Kak Batara, for the time and giving us the knowledge. It's very useful for us. Yeah.
Okay, but before we end up the sessions, I give it floor to Kak Aya to give your closing statement to end this session.
Okay, thank you. Very quickly, the main thing I want to talk about when it comes to coaching is it's not just about how smart the coaches are, how good the coaches are. You could find champions and they could be horrible coaches because they don't want to listen, they don't want to adapt to the people they're coaching. If you're if you're starting from zero, make sure you find a newbie friendly coach and 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 I have to be honest, not a lot of Indonesian coaches are newbie friendly coaches. So maybe it's gonna be tricky to ask them, but like make sure you are very forward when you're looking for a coach. Oh, they're looking for a newbie. We're looking for newbie coaches, not people who have like a lot of experience. Our main debaters, because most coaches in Indonesia want to take a team that is already relatively good, give them matter that they just want to talk about because they just want to flex that they know stuff, and then Bismillah, they can improve and apply it. That's often not, that's a lot of coaches do that. So be very aware of that. And second of all, if you're going to be the coaches, yeah, all of the feedback on knowing your audience, that's going to be the important thing. And make sure that you're always willing to listen as well. Because even as the coach, when other than just being prepared as far as the knowledge, I think Dawud is going to talk about this more, but how to make sure they're staying interested and they want to learn, not just willing to be coached, but they individually want to learn. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you for the opportunity given here today. Good luck for your future trainings.
Okay, thank you, Kaya. Thank you also, Shara, to moderate these sessions. And thank you for everyone here, especially for existing member of HEDS Batch 2021. Because of that, I closed these sessions for first materials from Kaya. Then we can start later for next sessions that will be brought by Kak Daud. Thank you, everyone. And wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.